A bright start, though, despite that chill in the air first thing this weekend. Plenty of sunshine for many during the morning. I think some cloud will build, but for the vast majority, it's going to stay dry and bright with sunny spells. One exception, Western Scotland, where there will still be further showers along with a keen breeze and a bit more cloud building later in the day. 12 to 14 Celsius for Scotland, 15 for Northern Ireland, 16 or 17 for England and Wales. And light winds as well, which means that overnight, once again, clear skies and temperatures falling away. So for England and Wales, it's a chilly night on Saturday night and temperatures in some sheltered spots first thing Sunday, around 2 to 5 Celsius once again. However, for Northern Ireland, for Scotland, it turns cloudier, it turns breezier, and the first signs of some wet weather pushing back into the west of Scotland by dawn on Sunday. And it looks like for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, Sunday will increasingly be an unsettled day with heavy rain and strong winds moving through, gales in exposed coastal areas. But for England and Wales, it stays mainly dry. Monday sees drier and brighter weather for all, feeling warm in the south.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewbs. This is Dewbs and Kerr. Now, Boris Johnson, do you all remember him? I'm wondering, with the Tories trailing so far behind in the polls, do you think they were a little bit quick to have gotten rid of Boris Johnson? I think perhaps their ego got the better of them and that they thought they could perhaps reach out to the red wall people without Boris. I don't think they'll be able to, though. Do you? Tell me. And the government has refused to rule out potential energy blackouts this winter. Much of the media are going ballistic about this, saying that we are heading for a return to the 70s. I'm saying, though, isn't that just sensible contingency planning? Where do you stand on it? And if you were charged with a serious sexual assault, should you remain anonymous? This is something our Home Secretary is looking into and perhaps wants to change. Where do you stand on it? Tell me. And we'll have all that to come, but first, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest news headlines.
Good evening, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom.
The Minister for Trade Policy, Conor Byrne, says he will fully cooperate with an investigation into allegations of inappropriate behaviour made against him. His comments come after he was sacked from the government after a complaint of serious misconduct at this week's party conference. The MP has had the party whip suspended whilst an investigation into allegations of inappropriate behaviour takes place. A spokesperson for Number 10 says the Prime Minister has been clear that the highest standards in public life must be upheld. The UK and Ireland have said they'll work towards resolving the stalemate over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Following a meeting of the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference in London, both parties reaffirmed their commitment to reinstate an executive at Stormont by October the 28th. Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris stressed the importance of an executive being formed.
I think it's vitally important that the executive reforms in Northern Ireland for all the reasons I've given previously about the quality of public services, the interventions on energy that we need to give and are finding quite difficult to do so in a Northern Ireland context. We will get there, but it will be much better and much more efficiently delivered by having an executive in place.
A man armed with a knife has been shot dead by armed officers in a police station car park in Derby. Derbyshire Constabulary said officers were sent to the scene just before 10 this morning. The Independent Office for Police Conduct has been informed. Kate Maynell, the Deputy Chief Constable of Derbyshire Police, says inquiries are ongoing to identify the man who died.
During the incident, a window was smashed at the police station. Armed officers were sent to the scene and a police firearm was then discharged. No officers, staff or other members of public were injured during the incident. It is not believed to be linked to counter-terrorism at this time. However, inquiries are ongoing. As you can see, a cordon is in place and Ascot Drive is currently closed and is likely to remain so while the investigation continues.
The US president says the world is facing the biggest threat of nuclear Armageddon since the Cuban Missile Crisis 60 years ago. Joe Biden says Russia's president wasn't joking when he threatened to use nuclear weapons after suffering setbacks in Ukraine. It follows a warning from Vladimir Putin that he'd use all means necessary to protect Russian soil, which he says now includes the 4 recently annexed Ukrainian regions. Former NATO commander Chris Parry told GB News we shouldn't underestimate Putin.
That there's distinct saber rattling by the Russians because they themselves are rattled by what's happened in Ukraine. And secondly, we've seen a pattern with American diplomacy whereby they try and out threats before they appear. And it's a method of deterring the other side from actually doing something. I don't see the crisis being as bad as that as in 1963. But we shouldn't underestimate the fact that there are certain circumstances under which I think Vladimir Putin would resort to nuclear weapons.
The United Nations has passed a motion to investigate alleged human rights abuses in Russia. Nearly 50 countries brought the motion to appoint an independent expert, including Britain. The Human Rights Council accused Moscow of creating a climate of fear through repression and violence. But Russia says the motion contains false allegations. It's the first time an expert has been appointed to investigate the rights record of a permanent member of the Security Council. The latest search for the last victim of the Moors murderers has ended after no evidence of human remains was found. After receiving a tip-off that Keith Bennett may be buried there, Greater Manchester Police began searching the area on Saddleworth Moor last Friday. The 12-year-old was one of 5 children killed by Ian Brady and Myra Hindley in the 1960s and is their only victim whose remains have never been found. The force says it is committed to finding answers for Keith's family.
I want to make it clear that our investigation to find answers for Keith's family is not over. We understand how our communities in Greater Manchester feel about this case, the renewed interest in it, and our shared desire to find Keith. Much of Saddleworth Moor is private land, so we would ask that members of the public in the first instance report any perceived intelligence to their local police service.
The Royal College of Midwives is urging its members to vote for strike action in a 4-week ballot from November. The move comes after a month-long consultation which saw members overwhelmingly reject the government's below-inflation pay offer. Around 75% of members in England and Wales who took part said they wanted to be balloted. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Michelle.
Thanks for that. Well, I'm with you right through until 7 o'clock this evening, and keeping me company is my panel. We've got Kevin Craig, who's the CEO of PLMR Communications Agency and the former advisor to Boris Johnson and a Conservative life peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Happy Friday. Looking a smart bunch. This is what we like on GB News.
Good to make an effort.
Yes, very dapper gentlemen. We like it.
You dress up for us, we should dress up for you, Michelle.
Yes, I like it. I like it. Yes, indeed, for the audience. Maybe they're dressed up at home for you. They might be sat at home in their suits watching you.
I'd like to think that, but it's actually the other way around. It's a matter of respect to them, even though they don't have to respect us, but we should respect them.
Well, there you go. You might be chilling out on your sofas with your gym jams on, but these guys are suited and booted for you at home. And speaking of you at home, you know the drill, don't you, about Dewbs & Co. It's not just about us, it's about you as well. Get in touch with me and tell me what is on your mind tonight. What do you think about the stories that we will be discussing? I want to talk to you about Boris Johnson, energy, fracking, oil and gas licences, and I want to talk about anonymity as well when it comes to sexual offences. So we've got all that to come. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's talk then, shall we, about what is going on in the Conservative Party. I'm going to put it bluntly, it's not been going great for them. Many polls saying that, quite frankly, they are lagging quite far behind. And it kind of gets me thinking, have they made a mistake just booting Boris out in the way that they did? A GB News exclusive poll, by the way. Many people, there's petitions going around left, right and centre saying we should have a general election tomorrow, which I disagree with. But we were asking, if there were to be a general election tomorrow, which party would you vote for? 52% said they'd support Labour in an election, and just 20% would support the Tories. Nadine Dorries has been speaking out about Boris as well. She is not pulling any punches and thinks definitely that losing Boris has hurt the Tories. Let's have a listen.
That was the only place we were ever going to be once we removed, after 12 years in power, our most successful Prime Minister. So a lot of where we are now, a lot of the position we find ourselves in right now is because of what we did to Boris and the fact that we removed Boris Johnson.
So, I'm of the kind of ilk, Daniel, where I sit now and I think, look, we are where we are. You've got Liz Truss. Everyone needs to unite around Liz Truss to help move the country forward. But I can't help but think that many in the Tory party played a little bit too much to their own egos and kicked Boris out without actually thinking through the long-term impacts of that, because I'm not sure that the Tories can appeal en masse to the working-class red wall voters without Boris. Am I wrong?
Well, actually, Michelle, I totally agree with you. I was probably the last person standing up for Boris, even as he was on the day he was resigning, saying that Boris should stay. I think the Conservative MPs who got rid of him behaved like a bunch of lemmings. And we were 9 points behind in the polls at the time, and everyone thought that was a disaster. What have you just read out to us?
What was it just then about, what
32,
was it? 30 odd?
32.
30
odd.
Well done, you paid attention, I like that.
We were 9 points behind in the polls when they threw Boris out, and they all thought that was a disaster. And look where we are now. But I'm also absolutely clear, like you, that if it was lemming-like and stupid to get rid of Boris, the last thing the Tory MPs need to do now is turn around and say, let's get rid of Liz Truss, because, I mean, what a shambles they're going to show themselves up to be. And they still haven't got a plan, just as they hadn't really got a plan when they got rid of Boris. They thought, we'll get Rishi. They didn't actually work out, you know, how you get the votes to get Rishi and who actually makes the decision. They didn't really have a plan. And they haven't got a plan as to who'd replace Liz Truss. They wouldn't want to hold another election in which the members had a say, so they'd want to impose it on the members. That would mean they'd be saying to the members of the party, you chose Liz Truss, we never liked her, we got rid of her. That would really alienate a lot of members. But to the public, it just looks like you're a total shambles.
I was just about to say the shambles.
You know, Liz Truss has got a plan of sorts. It has some merits. I think the package that Kwasi Kwarteng announced had many good things in it, badly handled in some ways, but many good things in the plan. And we've got to drive forward and try and make the country work under the Prime Minister we've got and we've elected as a party, and the MPs have accepted, and they should just shut up and get behind her.
Well, Kevin Craig, was just laughing throughout that. Well,
I don't think he's an actual
Why?
Boris supporter. That's the trouble.
I'm not, as Daniel says, an actual Boris supporter. I'm laughing at the accuracy of Daniel's analysis of quite how badly things have been handled by the Conservative Party in recent weeks. I mean, fair play to Liz Truss, though, in one, it took Boris years to fall 9 points behind, and in a matter of weeks, she's taken it to 32. So at least in that sense, she's very, very effective in tripling the Conservatives' poll deficit. I mean, look, I know that, and, Daniel worked alongside Boris for many years in government, and they did some, very good things together. But you can't really go back. You can't go back now. It's done. I think Liz Truss is being shown up to not be a very good communicator. That is a big deal in our quasi-presidential system sometimes. I have yet to see her ability to reach out to people in a way that's needed when your party's so far behind. And the problem is, of course, Boris had to go, though, because, and I know that Daniel didn't agree with it, and I think, you at the time, Michelle, had reservations about it, but his own party, you look back and you remember Jeremy Hunt, ex-Secretary of State for Health, said this Prime Minister's got no integrity, no competence, no vision. But what he did have was he was a good communicator, and that's gone. The announcement on
what he
Friday.
had, and this is the thing that I think the Tories have massively miscalculated, because I think the Tories, you got in with a landslide majority. You had people voting for you that would never in a month of Sundays have voted Tory before. And it was almost like it was baked into you generationally for certain people. You just don't vote Tory. Come hell or high water, you just don't vote Tory. And it was for so many people such a big deal to go Tory. And many of them said, we've lent you our vote. And the reason they did it was twofold: Boris and Brexit. And I think that Tories have just become so egotistical that they think, we can just get it anyway. We can still attract those people. We can still reach those people. And I think it's a big miscalculation.
Well, yeah, and the polling, the polling done by Matt Goodwin tends to bear you out that the policies and the approach taken by the new Conservative government does not appeal to the Red Wall voters. My theory of this, Michelle, very quickly, that Brexit was always a sort of revolutionary event that had the capacity to destroy both main parties if they didn't adjust themselves to it. And it nearly destroyed the Labour Party, just as I predicted in December 2019. And the Conservatives took the wrong message from that. They didn't say, as they should have done, now, what's it going to do to us? How do we have to adjust to it? They said, oh, look, we've got an 80-seat majority. We've worked this out. We've sorted this. We've got this worked out. But they haven't, because most of them still actually don't really accept that there's a different range of discourse in politics now, and they need to align themselves round that, and that the sorts of concerns that people in the Red Wall and other parts of the country have need a voice. But many of them are not that interested in that sort of argument.
And what I found interesting, like you say, the polls, so many people are going for Labour. But I think there's a peculiar thing happening in the Labour Party at the moment. Without being too rude, I think the Tories are making a bit of a hash of it on their own without Labour having to be disingenuous. And I don't know if you heard this from Keir Starmer, I think it was yesterday. Just listen to this clip.
What did he say?
I'll tell you what he said. I was going to say I'll try and put a Keir Starmer accent on, but it's not going to work, so I'll just tell you in my own words. Yeah. What he was basically saying is that the interest rates are rising, people's mortgages are going up, and he said as a direct consequence of this, what he called a kamikaze mini budget, that's just not true.
It is true.
It's not true.
It's true.
How can you say that the interest rates are rising? He didn't say in part. He didn't say, as a bigger thing. He said your mortgages are increasing directly because of this mini budget. How is that true?
Right, it's really straightforward, and great that you challenge the point. Would mortgage rates be where they are if Kwasi and Liz had not done their turn that Friday?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, they wouldn't.
No, they
Well,
they would.
Luckily for you, everybody, I've brought with me, admittedly a little bit crumpled now because I've had it in my bag for 2 days, but interest rates, right? So the Bank of England's target is 2% inflation, right? We started going over that as a country. Let's look at, August 2021. We started hitting 3.2% inflation. That was up to 5% in November, December 5.3, January 5.5, February 6. We started raising interest rates way too late in this country, way too late. So then there was this constant need, right, OK, we have to now play catch-up. It's not just our Bank of England, it's the Fed Reserve, it's the European Central Bank, and it is a reaction to inflation that has been building up, as I've just been describing, since, towards mid-late last year. This is not all of a sudden.
And the rise in interest rates, we mustn't forget there's a scandal here that's not being explored because Labour wants to pin the blame on Kwasi. But the reason that the bond yields went up was that we discovered, which I'd never known, that pension companies that manage pension funds, instead of, I thought, just managing things safely, have been doing dangerous derivatives, which the moment interest rates moved, they suddenly found that they were exposed and that they were in danger of running out of money. And the Bank of England had to step in to bring interest rates down, bond yields down. In fact, it cost them very little. They said they'd make £65 billion available. They've only spent £3 billion. But that had the effect of bringing the bond rates down to rescue the pension fund sector. And the real question is, what were these people doing with pension money?
You've heard
now nobody's...
You've
people
heard
have skated over that because they're more interested in Kwasi. But there's a real scandal there, Kevin. I'd have thought you'd want to know about that, a man like you.
The scandal is, and you've got your chart there, Michelle. I could show you 100 images about how interest rates rose as a direct consequence of the intervention, because as the Prime Minister herself has said sorry, or if it wasn't, it was her fellow cabinet member last night.
No, it was Nadeem Zahawi, because he was being pushed and pushed and pushed, and I think he just said it to move on from the point.
Well, that's very generous of you, but, I think the generosity's got to stop now, given the mistakes that are being made. She recognised she didn't communicate with the OBR, the right, Office of Budget Responsibility.
Well, they're useless.
Pardon me?
Well, they're useless.
Well,
I mean, their forecasting has been so dreadful in the past, I wouldn't ask them the price of a bottle of milk tomorrow, let alone what the economy's doing.
Well, it's the first time that a government announcement has gone so badly wrong. They didn't consult with them. The markets were spooked by the tax rise for the wealthiest, and then confidence was lost, and for inflation to be curbed, I'm absolutely contest that graph. One second. I just contest that graph, Michelle. There is evidence that interest rates have gone up as a direct result of the Prime Minister and the Chancellor's speeches and utterances that Friday.
Down again.
But do you concede that there is a global trend, not just a UK thing? There is a global trend that interest rates are rising and have to rise, and unfortunately for anyone that's got a mortgage or a loan or whatever, they're going to rise more and more and more. And that is to do with global pressures.
Basically, the US Federal Reserve sets the basic direction of interest rates for the rest of the civilized world, and they are they're increasing interest rates faster than we have been, and even faster. The ECB's nowhere. The euro's in real trouble, and we haven't been raising them fast enough. We will follow them. We will get there, because the force of nature will take us there, but we're being too slow about doing it.
Guys.
In the meantime, it's really difficult. It will be really difficult.
Go on, Kevin.
For people rolling off fixed mortgages.
Right. And I think you both are being very, very charitable to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, because the reality is the mortgage rates, the hundreds of pounds increases, I suspect you're both also going to suffer that now when you come off fixed rates. Those mortgages have gone up. And they wouldn't have gone up were it not for those interventions on the Friday.
You see, that's
and
what
we can disagree about that.
That's what I don't agree.
Okay.
They would have gone up anyway. Michelle is right. Inflation is the biggest challenge facing the country, in my view, is inflation. Inflation is utterly corrosive. We're not talking about strikes in the public sector today, about the nurses, about the midwives who were mentioned on the news, about the rail workers. But if we were, you know why they're striking. They're striking. It's a natural consequence of inflation. You see prices go up, you start to demand higher wages, and if you don't get them and you have the power, you go on strike. Inflation is utterly corrosive to society, and it's got to be defeated. The only way of defeating it, despite what all these clever central bankers tell you, they're now relearning the fact that the only way of defeating it is to put interest rates up. And that's what we should be doing, to squeeze inflation out of the economy. And only on that basis can we rebuild the economy, in my view.
Let me ask you this,
and that burst of inflation has been building up really since the global financial crisis in 2008, because we never faced up to reality then. We thought we could carry on living on printed money, and then we printed it like mad when we got to COVID, and now we're still going on. Yes. And only recently the Bank of England has started retreating from that, but they still need, in my view, to put interest rates up higher, rather than just wait and hope that inflation will come down next year.
So one of the things that I find a little bit peculiar about the goings-on at the moment is it feels to me like you've got two main levers, okay, economic levers, fiscal levers, whatever you want to call them. So you've got your tax rates, and we're talking about, right, we're going to basically lower tax rates to put more money into people's pockets. Yeah. And then on my other hand, we're going to raise interest rates to put less money into people's pockets.
That's precisely the problem.
So I'm seeing these two levers completely contradict each other.
They do.
Am I missing something?
No, they do.
No,
they do.
You are missing something.
What am I missing?
What you're missing is
the
interest rate lever is not fundamentally about putting money into people's pockets. It's fundamentally about re-establishing the stability of the currency so that prices rise only very moderately, as say 2% inflation or whatever your reasonable target might be. And that's necessary for the stability of the economy. As far as the putting money into people's pockets through tax cuts, that doesn't actually increase inflation or economic activity, because some of that money might be saved, but also because we make the assumption that the government, if it had that money in its pocket, hadn't given it back to you, that the government wouldn't be spending it. But the government's also spending it. So it's not actually, it's just who's spending it, not how much is being spent, that is going round here.
I think that I mean, we hold very different views on this. I think that...
I thought we were close to agreeing.
No. Alas, not. I think that, you know...
You're coming round to my way of thinking?
Very good.
Go on, Kevin.
The government has not handled the past few weeks very well, OK? They themselves say the announcements were put out in a cat-handed fashion. We'll agree to differ...
That's true, and I agree with that.
Right?
Yeah, we all agree.
We all agree on that. We will agree to differ. You both are sitting here tonight saying that you think that the increases in interest rates have nothing to do with the actions of the government. I disagree on that. You, Michelle, make a very good point that the increases given in the 1% tax increase to lower incomes will be totally devastated and cut and cancelled out by mortgage rate rises. You're right. And I think the big political challenge is not about currency or those issues. It's more about what kind of lives are most people in this country leading, and what state is the country in, and what are the priorities of the ruling administration.
Yeah, well, there won't be any priorities if you don't get inflation under control, because we saw what happened. I mean, it's a very long time ago, but I lived through it. You're too young, Kevin. But we saw what happened in the 1970s when inflation did get out of control, and it led to huge amounts of public sector strikes. It led to businesses not being able to price things properly.
You're right. The
IMF,
IMF got involved
I was in university,
economy.
and I used to go into the co-op opposite me. And in those days, they had those machines that put little price sticker labels on cans. You remember? Say, 44 pence for a can of beans or whatever. And you'd go into the co-op opposite, and you'd find that there were 8 or 9 stickers on top of each other because the prices have been going up so fast while the can of beans have been sitting there on the shelf.
Give the Prime Minister time, Dan. You may see that again. I mean, power cuts are coming. The 70s are coming back.
Well, you tee me right nicely into my next topic. So I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to reflect on some of your comments when we come back. And as Kevin has nicely teed up for me, could do my job, you could. I'll be talking to you about energy. Are we going to be having blackouts this winter? Or is that just the media being a bit hysterical as usual? I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping me company, Kevin Craig and Daniel Moylan. Welcome back, everybody. We've just been talking about Boris and interest rates. Phil says, Michelle, the interest rates have been kept for too low for too long. This basically encouraged people to borrow beyond their means. I'm afraid, he says, we've been in a false economy. I don't disagree with you, actually, on some of that, and I worry, actually. I think a lot of people are going to get an incredibly tough shock once their fixed-rate products come to an end. Paul says, Michelle, we're lowering taxes to put money in people's pockets on the one hand and then raising interest rates to take it away from them in the other. You are indeed correct. Lots of you saying that, you voted Tory at the last election and you are considering your options going forward. I hear you, and I suspect there's many people doing exactly the same. Now, let's talk energy rationing, shall we? This is basically the national grid saying that if things in Russia get a little bit worse, we could potentially be looking at blackouts. Now, many in the media, are going absolutely into crisis mode. I don't know about you, but it feels to me we just lurch from one crisis to another. Sometimes I think the world's going to end with a crisis. Do you remember the HGV driver shortage, by the way?
Yes.
You had that.
Last
you
year.
had fuel crisis. You had the driver.
Non-stop.
It's just you go from one crisis to another to another. Daniel's just been telling me that one news outlet that shall remain nameless is giving tips already on what to do with a blackout. It's all a little bit hysterical, but nonetheless, do you think we're heading towards the 70s or not?
Well, it feels like it, and what I found really interesting...
How does it feel like it?
Power cuts on the agenda maybe at Christmas?
They're
That's a
not on the agenda.
Well, they might be. That's a fact. And there was a discussion at cabinet level about whether or not Jacob Rees-Mogg, the modern man's communicator, was allowed to run a campaign to give people energy-saving tips this winter in order that we might avoid power cuts. Now, we're led to believe that the Prime Minister vetoed that, and there have been government figures coming out in the last 24 hours saying that power cuts might happen. So that's not me making that up.
Do you know what I think is happening? And I actually applaud the sensibleness, and this government cannot win. If they do contingency planning, then they're heckled and it's crisis mode. If they don't do contingency planning, then they're remiss at their job. They can't win.
No, they can. And do you know what? sometimes when the government tries to do the right thing and give advice to its citizens, there are voices, sometimes in this very studio, that say, oh, no nanny state, don't tell people what to do. It's just the government here, had they gone with this information campaign, it's good sense.
Why should the government be doing it? Why does everything have to be done by the government?
Yes.
Well, let me come back to what I think.
To do something.
Let me come back to what I think about this. This is a typical modern media setup. I mean, instead of having the responsible media we had in the 1970s, when those power cuts, of course, were caused by Scargill and the National Union of Mine Workers on their 1970s strike, not the one we know as the miners' strike, that happened in the 80s, but the 70s one when they closed down the coking stations through secondary picketing. Instead of that, what we've got is a media that says, Prime Minister, can you guarantee there won't be power cuts? Well, of course she can't. It's like going up and saying, Prime Minister, can you guarantee it won't rain? Well, of course she can't. I mean, she doesn't know what's going to happen. You have Biden on your own news clip saying there could actually, talking seriously, and if he, which he can, talk seriously about nuclear war actually happening. How would you say, no, I can guarantee there won't be power cuts? So they say, the Prime Minister refused to rule out power cuts. Look at that. There could be power cuts. What do you need for power cuts? Now, get a list out. And you've got the news saying, get your torch ready and don't use candles and everything. There are going to be power cuts. She can't guarantee there aren't going to be power cuts, but the National Grid thinks that it's very likely we'll be able to get through without them. And I'm reasonably sanguine that we probably can. But,
But just on
this is a media-type trip.
Yeah.
Then I'll tell you the other thing. If they came out with advice, I remember going back to the same period in the 1970s, a minister came out with advice. He said, share the bathwater. Use it twice.
Well,
and
we're not doing that.
And save heating, you see. You could use the bathwater twice.
But I thought
absolutely excoriated. And then every cabinet minister will be asked, have you shared your bathwater today? We didn't have showers in those days, we had baths. Well, have you shared your bath today, cabinet minister? And how about you, Mr. Rees-Mogg, as he goes past? Who did you share your bath with today? It would be endless like that. The government hasn't learned how to handle and deal with a truly irresponsible media such as we have at the moment, with the shining exception of this particular show.
Of course. But then I think you're saying about this information campaign, the cost associated with that was estimated to be about 15 million quid. Right. You're saying about sharing bathwater. I remember growing up, we did share bathwater. I'm one of 6 siblings, and we did all share bathwater, not because for any reason other than that's all we really could afford. We didn't have a lot of money. So if you don't have a lot of money, you don't need Jacob Rees-Mogg or whoever to spend £15 million of our money, taxpayers' money, telling people, turn the light off if the room's empty, turn the radiator off if the room's empty. Because if you don't have a lot of money, you will do that anyway.
Well, I partially agree.
And I'll tell you,
hang on one second. You jump right in there, right?
Go on then.
So 1 second. You are right that a lot of people from backgrounds where they didn't have a lot of money, all of which are on this panel, have a certain common sense running through them, I think, true. But public information campaigns do change behaviour. They do save money. They do lead to changes in outcomes. And if that 15 million quid information campaign, which is money not to be sniffed at, but is a fraction of the billions wasted by the current administration in the past 2 years, it could have reduced our power consumption. I can't believe I'm saying this. Jacob Rees-Mogg in his defence, a campaign like that he's not doing for the fun of it. He's obviously put it forward because it might save power, save energy and save money as you spend to save, not just to waste cash.
I'll tell you something else that really worries me, and it's not just the information campaign, it's the headlines. A lot of elderly people die of hypothermia, and very often they can afford to put the heating on. The reason they don't put the heating on is that they're terrified that they might not be able to afford to put the heating on.
Of course.
And they're terrified into it by sort of not just information campaigns, but headlines and whatever saying it's power cuts, your bills are going through the roof, you won't be able to live. And they're sitting there when they could actually have the heating on, and they probably could afford it, and they can die of it. And I think we've got to be very careful talking on shows like this about power cuts. In recognising that there is a risk, anything could happen. We could even, Mr. Biden says we could even have a nuclear war in the Ukraine. Anything could happen, but I think we have to be reasonable and moderate about it, and we mustn't frighten people into doing things which damage them.
And we saw this briefly, I won't even get into this because I know we disagree, but the whole COVID messaging campaign, people were terrified not to go into hospitals, don't go into hospitals, don't go into hospitals. And I really believe that actually people got so frightened that they didn't go into hospitals when they should have done because they were so afraid of the whole COVID thing. So you can scare people. But anyway, let's stick with energy. Fracking then. Where do you stand on this? Because now, a couple of different approaches, aren't they? There's potentially going to be companies allowed to go door to door, essentially, offering financial incentives for people to allow fracking in their back garden. You get what I mean? It's not necessarily always in their back garden, but in their local vicinity.
Yeah. Well, this is a quite extraordinary story that's broken today. And essentially, incentives in speech marks of up to £1,000 might be offered to people in order that they support, in due course, fracking to happen in their locality. I mean, the government had it right in 2019 under your former boss, where the government was against fracking, right, for all the environmental impacts it was going to cause. That was one of those Boris Johnson policies I thought was great. But now...
Well, you would, wouldn't you?
Well, because I care about the future of the planet.
And now we're starved of energy, and you're worried, you're upbraiding us about power cuts, and we could have had all that nice gas.
Not through fracking
Let him finish
alone.
his point.
Believe hypocrisy.
Well, hang on. The hypocrisy surely is with a Conservative administration in 2019 says, no, quite rightly, fracking is bad for the environment, communities don't want it, we don't know what damage it's going to cause. Fast forward to 2022, a desperate attempt at the new administration to find points of that they can show the British public Liz Truss was worth electing. Fracking's back. And I think there's a lot of Conservative MPs. This will be like housing. We want new housing, just not here. We want, we want fracking, but just not here.
But circumstances change, as do cost-benefit analysis. So by the time you're quoting back in whenever 2019, at that point in time, actually the risk of fracking versus the need and the benefit of fracking potentially was very different to now, when we're in a situation where we can potentially be held hostage for energy. Surely that then changes the situation, brings fracking right to the fore, doesn't it?
I think this question about money is important because people describe it as a bribe, but actually there's nothing new about this. When the railways were built, even the underground railways were built in the 19th and early 20th century, the landowners even above the underground railway, had to be compensated at a rate set by Parliament. And they would receive compensation for the disturbance to their property arising and from the construction and so forth. And that's quite right that they should receive compensation. Yeah. What happened after the Second World War is that the government just nationalised all those rights and nobody gets compensation for underground or overhead anymore at all. It's just been nationalised by the government and they do it. But this is just going back to the old principle that if somebody's going to get permission to do some mining of one sort or another in your area, and you're going to suffer potentially noise or disruption or extra vehicles or whatever it might be, then you should be entitled to some financial compensation for that disturbance. And I don't find that, I think that's a proper recognition of private property rights. And then the question is, do people have to accept it? In other words, do you make it mandatory?
Yeah.
Or do you just allow one person in the village to say no and that stops the whole thing? That's the difficult question. But the principle of offering financial compensation, I think, is right and well established.
Well, the great thing about you is you know your history, right?
Do.
And that's a really good point as it related back to the railways at that time. The fracking is not the same as transport infrastructure, I would say, number one. And also it's private companies that will then stand to benefit. So there are differences.
Well, the railways were private companies in those days
yes,
as well.
But
believe me, people thought the railways would make you pregnant. They thought, I mean, people had amazing ideas about what the railways would do if they were allowed anywhere near your house.
And that is also historically accurate, I have to say. But the fact is that transport infrastructure, I think we should look at differently to fracking and the impact that may cause on the environment. And again, there are big policy papers, Conservative Party, environmental policy papers that say we should not allow fracking in our country.
Yeah, well, this is a choice. And the fact is, we've got really big choices here. We have found that Europe, which is the European Union, which is important to us, even though we're not part of it, it's a neighbour, it's an important neighbour, and it's a partner in NATO, most of it, has left itself dangerously exposed, strategically and economically, to Russian gas. We're much less exposed, and we have large reserves of our own under our feet, under our seas. And we have to make a decision about how much self-sufficiency is important to us, a strategic decision about how much self-sufficiency is important to us going ahead. Do we just rely on the global markets, as we have done, or do we say, no, we're going to get the maximum value, because we're going to need gas. The Greens don't like admitting it, but they know it's true. We're going to need gas for the next 20, 30 years, even if we go completely net zero by 2050. And should we have a strategic ambition to maximise our own output so that we're less dependent on potentially dangerous foreign powers? And I think the answer to that in 2019 might have been one, but I think if you ask people today, you would have roars of applause. The vast majority of people would be on my side, Kevin, and not yours. They'd say, yes, we do not want to be dependent on mad dictators in foreign countries.
Right. Well, a short thing in response to that, Daniel.
We don't want blackouts caused by Putin.
The choice is the last 10 years, we haven't taken on as much onshore. We haven't done as much as we could with solar. We have missed the opportunity.
Yeah, but those only
hang on one second.
They only work when the wind's blowing. You need gas for when the wind isn't blowing.
Daniel Moylan, go on.
Very badly behaved
finish
today, right?
Go on.
We know there has been a choice in terms of us investing in people's money, the government's money in renewable energy. We can't. You're right. Be hostage.
You can't walk down the street without running into a solar
into
solar panels or a bloody turbine.
We cannot be held hostage to foreign governments.
But the point is, you need gas for when the wind isn't blowing.
Actually, no, we have missed opportunities, right? There's this whole green revolution. If anyone can't get to sleep tonight, right, read Ed Miliband's conference speech on the opportunities for our country from green energy.
That'll get you to sleep.
And as a positive thing to say, the government is about, I think, to sign some really good new agreements with Norway, where we're getting a democratic power and getting more energy. So it's not an either-or, but I just don't believe
but the
that
Germans,
fracking's part of it.
The EU wants to steal all the Norwegian gas. That's another thing that's been going on today.
Well,
they can't steal the electricity, apparently.
Let's not twist this into having a dig at the EU.
Yeah, well, it's terrible what's going on in the EU at the moment. I feel very sorry for them. But that isn't my point. My point, though, is a very serious
Make it a very quick one.
Very quick one
is
you have to have a source of energy for when the wind isn't blowing. Currently, that could be hydrogen, it could be various things. But the infrastructure for that isn't there. So for the next 20 or 30 years, you're going to have gas available for when the wind isn't blowing and when the sun isn't shining. That's simple fact.
British jobs, Daniel. There's British jobs that we're not creating.
There are British jobs in gas.
Well, my question to you lot
Lots of good jobs in gas.
I'm going to give these... Yeah, right. You tell me at home, would you allow fracking pretty much on your doorstep if you were paid up to £1,000 to allow it to happen? Many of you are writing in with your reservations about fracking, and they're all fine. I'm registering them as we go along, but could you be paid, basically, to park those reservations and say yes?
Would you,
get in
Michelle?
touch and tell me. Me?
Yeah.
I'll ponder that and I'll give you my answer after the break. Bill, you make a good point on the email, by the way. You say, please can everyone point out how this is all to do with Russia and the sanctions on Russia backfiring. I do have to say, sometimes it does feel a little bit like when everyone was push to sanction, that perhaps the consequences of that were not fully considered. So I hear what you're saying there, Bill, and I have to say, I agree with you. Right, I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to ponder my answer to the fracking one. You do the same, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, with you right through till 7. My panel tonight, Kevin Craig, the CEO of PLMR Communications Agency, and I have the former advisor to Boris Johnson and the Conservative Life Peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan. I've told them to pack it in talking over each other. I've just had a rummage, so I have in my drawers under there. My cupboard's under there, it sounded a bit wrong. My cupboard's under there. I've got a gavel in there, but someone's nicked my gavel. I've just got the base part. What do you call the base part to the gavel?
Well, the handle.
No, not the handle.
Oh, sorry,
the
the base part of the gavel is what I always call it.
No,
That's
this.
perfect. I know what
Hang
you mean.
on, stay there, everyone. I'll show you.
The
Then
thing
you
you
can
hammer.
see.
Yeah.
This is what I have.
Oh,
Hang on.
But not a hammer.
That.
You could use a cup.
That's all I
You
have.
could use a GB News cup.
Yeah. What is that? What is that called? That part of the gavel? What is it?
That's not the gavel.
The base. No, that's the base of the gavel.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, my point is, I'm trying to tell them to pack it in. I was going to bang my gavel if they won't stop it, and I couldn't find it. Someone's nicked it. So all I'm left with is the base, which is as much use as a chocolate fire guard. Right. I was asking you lot, would you accept money to allow fracking in your own back garden, basically? I have to say, who's this? Isabel. She says, no, no, no to fracking. That is in capital letters, so you mean business. Who's this? Jenny says yes. Dave says yes. Without compensation, he says, I would do it just for the good of the country.
Good man.
Hilltop says yes to fracking. Who's this? Paddy says yes, they can come over into my garden. By the way, why haven't they sparked up all the coal-fired power stations yet as well? Don't say that, because Kevin, I don't think you'll agree with that one, will you? Lee, yes, they'll have fracking. I can go, I'd say it's pretty split. I'd have fracking. Just tell me quickly, would you have fracking near you?
No.
So Kevin's a no. I think I'm a yes, actually. What about you?
Well, I live near Kensington Gardens, and I think a fracking site in Kensington Gardens would be absolutely fantastic.
Kensington Gardens?
And it wouldn't happen, because all the people with stacks of money would object, and they'd say, stick it somewhere
Stick
where
it in
all the poor
Blackpool,
live.
that's
Yeah,
what they'd say.
That's what would happen.
They'd say, get it in Blackpool. Right, let's move on, shall we? Away from fracking and gavel parts, let's talk about something quite serious. If you are charged with a sexual assault but you're not convicted, should you be anonymous? This is what the Home Secretary has been talking about, potentially making some changes when it comes to that. There's been a lot of people, haven't there, in the press that have been falsely accused of sexual assaults. So the debate is rumbling on, should people be anonymous when they're accused of something, when they're charged of something or not? Joining me down the line, Margaret Gardner, the Director of the False Allegations Support Organisation. Good evening to you. Where do you stand on this?
Good evening, Michelle. Well, we stand on the fact that there should be anonymity for all, or no anonymity at all. At the moment, it's only for the people that are actually making the allegations. And that means when they've made the allegation, everybody assumes then that the other person is the abuser. And that, from the start, is not correct. It should not be allowed. By everybody having anonymity, both the person accused, as is the victim, have no input into the media, and the families aren't attacked either. It's not just the spouses, it's the children. The locals attack them as well. even if it's just verbally. So it needs to be either one or the other, both anonymised or neither.
Right, both or neither. There you go, Margaret. You have given us food for thought and to discuss. Thank you very much. That's the director of the False Allegations Support Organisation there. Kevin, where are you on this?
Well, I am really concerned by the damage that's done to an individual who is publicly named as being accused of these crimes. I think it can destroy lives. It's not fair. There have been some very high-profile examples of it. Just take one example. Take Cliff Richard and see what he went through, and that ended up in a very expensive legal case. I am equally concerned by the very low conviction rate of rapes in this country. I'm concerned by the fact that a lot of predominantly women suffer sexual crimes with no justice. But I am attracted by making the system fairer to those who are innocent and stand to have their reputation trashed, before they've even come to trial.
So what would you ask for then? Would you say what? Anonymity, complete anonymity? What would you say to what Margaret was just saying there in terms of what about people that make the accusations?
Well, I just think, however the system is designed, can we please protect the principle of innocent until proven guilty and avoid trial by media, whilst also recognising that not enough is done to successfully prosecute rape in this country?
So you are, to me, in the camp of anonymity.
I am, to err on the side of caution, yeah.
Where are you, Daniel?
Well, I come at it slightly differently, and I'm very worried about this trend towards anonymity because we have a tradition in this country of public justice. The courts are public and they can be reported on. That's what happens in them can be reported on. And that's the principle. And over my lifetime, that's gradually been whittled away, and it's worried me. And of course, what it leads to is demands for yet more and more anonymity and more secrecy. So there was a time when it became the case that people under the age of 18 couldn't be named. I don't understand why that's the case. I don't believe that should continue. Then it became a point where people who were making allegations of sexual abuse or rape couldn't be named. But asymmetrically, that is, the person who was being accused was in a different category. So naturally, you come along at a certain point, and then people start saying, well, they shouldn't be named either. Family courts are almost, this is not criminal, of course, but family courts are almost entirely private now. Up until the 60s and 70s, a divorce case was a public trial. The evidence had to be given in public, and it was reported on in the press. That doesn't happen at all now. It's all sort of, little bits are leaked out. The other thing is, I don't think these things necessarily protect people. If you're charged with a crime, you should have confidence that your vindication is your acquittal in a public court. That restores your reputation. That establishes your reputation.
The saying is,
if you just say mud sticks, then you might as well have a completely secret justice system. Yeah. Now, secret justice is the worst possible outcome for us because the first thing is it's unfair to everybody, but the second is it destroys confidence, the public confidence in the criminal justice system, because the public are participants in trials. They're not just observers. A crime, a serious crime, is not just an offence against the person who suffers it, it's an offence against society at large. And the criminal system is there to vindicate society's interest in that trial. So the public are not simply, watching this. They are a part of it. And they need to be persuaded that justice is done. Justice has to be seen to be done.
Kevin, your final response?
Just to say, as somebody who's done a lot of legal cases in my public relations career, the problem is, which I think you might have some sympathy for by the way you were nodding or disagreeing there, is that the damage is done, to people when they are falsely accused. And Daniel, you do point out quite rightly that there is a moment of vindication with the verdict, but it's too late by then. In the world of mass media, reputations are trashed and lives ruined.
Yes, they are indeed. You guys are quite divided on that one, I have to say. Coming up at 7 is Patrick. He's in the studio, raring to go. Patrick, what have you got?
Oh, I've got absolutely loads for you. OK, so nurses, should they go on strike? Are they paid quite enough? I've got a nurse on who thinks they are, actually. Also, blackouts. Is it that bad, or do the younger generation need to just kind of get a bit of a grip, really? I'm going to be rapping live on air. That's Challenge Christie's. I am rapping. Yes, you heard that right. We give away a dog. While I say that, we try to rehome one.
Presents?
Say that again. No, it's not Christmas rapping. It's much more offensive than that.
Oh, it's my birthday.
It's the most right-wing rap
swearing.
you've ever heard. Yes, it's terrible. And we've got loads more as well. A fabulous panel, all of that stuff. So, yes, tune in, 7 till 9.
Oh, right. I was getting all excited. It's my birthday this weekend, and I thought you was wrapping the presents in advance of that. No such luck, I can tell you. Kay says, brilliant guests tonight. They are very entertaining. Thank you very much. Many of you very wise people have been getting in touch saying the word you're looking for, Michelle, is block.
Well, there you are.
There you go. Learn something new every day,
Every
don't you, on
day.
Dewbs and Co? You learn something new every day. I knew there was a word for it, I just couldn't remember what that word was. Anyway, right here, look at that, look at the time. Flies, doesn't it, when you've had good fun? Kevin, Daniel, thank you very much.
Happy birthday.
Oh, yes.
Birthday, yes.
Yeah, hope
Thank
you enjoy
you.
it.
Yes, I hope I get some wonderful gifts. Hint, hint, if anyone's watching. Have a wonderful weekend, and I shall see you. I'll be older. I'll see you on Monday. Have a good one.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Following Friday's lively weather, the wind, the rain, the showers, it's actually a fine start this weekend with sunny spells for most, but there is more wind and rain on the way. Another frontal system approaching, a deepening area of low pressure out in the Atlantic. Ahead of that, a ridge of high pressure builds in following Friday's active front, which still clears the southeast during Friday evening. But once that's gone, well, actually, the winds fall a bit lighter. We'll see clear spells in many places. Still a few showers into North Wales, North West England, Western Scotland, Northern Ireland. But elsewhere, with largely dry weather overnight and clear spells, lighter winds, temperatures in some sheltered spots around, say, parts of central England, East Wales, 2 to 5 Celsius. Nevertheless, a bright start to the day for many on Saturday. Still 1 or 2 showers for North Wales, North West England during the morning. They tend to disappear into the